So, we're here to talk about the third eye, universal wisdom and insight. When we come back to the throat chakra, we're looking at universal language and universal understanding. Our third eye also houses a bit of that understanding as well, except it's coming from the perspective of perception and observation. Whenever we look at any chakra, we are hopefully going to find some sort of balance. So we want to cleanse it, clear it, and get balance between the pros and cons, or the negatives and the positives, and heal the shadows or the wound within that chakra. When we talk about the third eye, it's not just about clear seeing as far as clairvoyance goes, or universal insight for downloads and visions. It's actually about a lot more than that. It's about discernment. It's about illusion. It's about observing yourself with insight and clarity, both the inside world and the outside world, from a clear perception. If we look at the mind and the third eye as far as the two sides go, we've got above and below the head, the heart. We have emotional bias that can sometimes cloud our judgment. Judgment is associated with the third eye as well, because this is where we perceive. Sometimes we can have belief systems that are also associated with the third eye. These are where our stories are made in the mind. And so we can have emotional bias that can come out into our stories. That will cause a little bit of a cloudiness inside the third eye. When we get to a complete state of balance inside the third eye, we're really looking for that balance between emotional bias and clear judgment with the logical self. So the feminine and the masculine, or the yin and the yang. When we bring those two worlds together and we're able to clearly perceive which parts of our stories in our mind, in our third eye, is coming from our emotions, our fears, our subconscious mind, our past memories, versus what is in my reality. So gaslighting and things like that can come up inside the third eye. When we come back to those words, discernment, disillusionment, they're key words when we're going to observe our lives and our own selves. Beyond the spiritual lens, you can sort of see how the third eye is a lot more than just spiritually seeing things, being able to get visions and clairvoyance and universal access and knowledge. It's beyond that. With every chakra we have the multiple realms that come together. We've got the emotional, the psychological, the physical, and the spiritual. And we have imprinting that can happen from the past lives. Fear is also held inside the third eye. That can be fear towards spirit, that can be fear towards what you've seen. Sometimes you'll find that people have their third eye closed down when they've seen things that they shouldn't have, especially as a child. Or where they've seen paranormal things as a child, and there is a great fear around what is reality and what is not reality. So, things can look foggy when we're looking through a lens that is emotionally biased. When it comes to the third eye, we want to meditate as much as possible. The glands are also connected to dopamine, melatonin, DMT, and these chemicals are going to help you regulate, regulate your metabolism, regulate your sleep, your motivation. And when we think about the glands that are associated with every chakra, as above, so below, and our fear is triggered inside the brain. So again, this is where we can have some of that clouded judgment, and it's just a survival mechanism. Awareness is key with your insight. It's being able to detach when it comes from a balanced place within the third eye chakra. Again, this word observation. To observe something, we stand clearly back. But I don't know about you, but sometimes I can get not so much clouded, but blindsided. Right? And this is where our third eye comes in. When we're walking around, potentially with blinkers on. Right? And when things come, we can get blindsided because we haven't opened up our perspective enough to think about all of the different possibilities that could come our way, to think about all of the potentials behind what is surface, what is beyond the surface layer when we're interacting with other people, or potentials. To every event, to every potential outcome, there are many potential outcomes that could be there. But if we have a narrow mind, and therefore a narrow lens within our third eye, then again we can be blown away because our rigid mindset is so tight. Something comes along and we're blindsided. Maybe we've never thought about opening up that view enough to look at every angle. So a balanced state inside the third eye, beyond vision, is being able to open that perspective. The way that I see it is similar to a kaleidoscope. When it comes to the third eye, we want to look through many different windows, see from various colours and various views. And that way we can form a larger picture, because with universal wisdom and insight, there is much more than what meets the eye. So we want to see things for how they are, not just fact, not just what's in front of us. We want to think about the potentials around that. But I also want to lead you back to yourself with your third eye as well. Because when it comes to you and your needs and your emotions, what can often happen for a lot of people is that the third eye closes down and it gets cloudier when you don't have much time spent on slowing down to look inside, to look in at your own landscape within your soul, within your body, within your mind, within your emotions. So if you never stop to actually say, how do I feel and why do I feel? Then our lens is purely focused outward. This is where the balance comes in again with the third eye. In and out. And what can happen then is that we create a shadow in our perspectives. Avoidance and delusion, those words are associated with the third eye too. This is where we try not to judge something. We try not to judge it as harsh. We try not to form a bias. But avoidance creates a shadow. Anything that's hiding behind that shadow has the potential to wreak havoc and bring up different stories in the background. Maybe you've avoided the fact that you're upset that a friend or a partner or a colleague failed to tell you that they were not going to be there today. Our insight to look in and assess how we're feeling is so important here, because if we avoid that, we avoid confrontation within the third eye, then that shadow starts to harbour, and it creates more stories and it gets angrier. And then other people are starting to cop it because you haven't actually sat with yourself and assessed how you feel about the situation. And then for some people, they can just keep running and running and running as fast as they can away from themselves. Now, all of those things, I hope, are going to paint a picture for how you could get an unbalanced third eye. So we want to meet and greet ourselves, our emotions, our reality, our potential by opening up that perspective. We want to greet those things and confront those things. So not to be blinded. So not to be blinded by the shadows. And then also not to be blinded by arrogance, which can also come through in the third eye. Arrogance is within a small mind frame. And this is where we also find people housing spiritual arrogance. I know it all. I know everything. I don't need to heal. I'm fully healed. There's no such thing, right? Open the lens. Cleanse the lens as regularly and as much as possible, and be willing to confront what world is truly there. Sometimes we might spend too much time on the insight, looking in, and then maybe judgment comes back through into this perception. To look through the third eye with detachment and observation, to witness yourself and others and the world, is going to bring clarity into the way that you see the world, into the reality. Truth can be your armor, because you're no longer deluding yourself. No longer deluding yourself that one more bag of chips is going to do good for your body. That, in a nutshell, is what your third eye is really about. So let's move on to what it could look like with a overactive third eye. So let's talk about the overactive state. If the third eye is going too fast, the glands are going to produce too much dopamine. When there's too much dopamine in the brain, we can have signs and symptoms of psychosis. If you've ever heard of spiritual psychosis, this is it. When the third eye is going too fast, or sometimes it's being blown open, it can cause a disruption in the brain chemistry. With too much dopamine stimulated, you may start to see things that aren't spirit and aren't real. You will often find with bipolar, schizophrenia, and spiritually arrogant people, the third eye is very fast and the energy will feel quite strong. You'll also not know what's reality. And this is really important when you're learning spiritual development. You want to slow down that third eye as regularly as possible to do lots of grounding, because when every chakra starts opening up and you're using them more and you've got more power and energy moving through them, it is common for them to go faster. So if it's going too fast and it's overactivated, you may find that you're struggling to know what's real. And then that fear starts to pick up, right? Because you don't know whether or not you're judging things correctly. And you're like, are they trying to get at me? Are they against me? And these belief systems will be challenged with fear if it's overactive. Or there may be a spiritual arrogance that comes through. There's this I am the God complex stuff. I know everything and I know it all. Those are some signs and symptoms of having a too fast third eye. On the other hand, when you've got underactive third eye energy systems, you can find real sluggishness. Again, as I said before, this is connected to dopamine. Dopamine helps us with motivation and reward, and it helps us feel good. Without enough dopamine, and it's going slow and it's sluggish, this is also going to affect our overall hormonal balance. So as above, so below. And we will find a lot more sluggishness. There will be headaches on both sides, overactive and underactive. You can sometimes have that headache stuff come through. Might just be really foggy. That one's really common, just really, really foggy, especially through the frontal part of the head and in the temples. So headaches are very common with this. What I said before about melatonin being associated with the chakra as well, melatonin helps us regulate our timing in our body to wake up, to feel alive, and to get good rest and good sleep. In depression, you will often find that there is a sluggishness and a slowness in the third eye. We haven't got enough light coming into our perspective, our world, our emotional judgment, our connection, and the glands in here will also be affected around those things. So with the melatonin, one of the best ways to increase our melatonin is to get out and have adequate sun hours and to have adequate time away from our good old handy fake lights in our houses. Going back to nature resets the rhythm and the timing in our brains. So another way to cleanse and clear and keep our timing going properly, keep our melatonin nice and up, is through meditation. And simply bringing in light, bringing in white light into the third eye. So that will also help us pick up our energy levels and cleanse the third eye, obviously, if we're bringing in some white light. And it will also help the circadian rhythm in the body and produce adequate amounts of melatonin. On either side, if you've got overactive or underactive, you can also find some trouble with your sleeping. Those hormones are also connected to these things, and these neurohormones, neurochemicals, they're also going to affect your sleep. So in this space, you've got your subconscious mind. As I said earlier, it's connected to fear. So in an underactive state, you will find really poor quality sleep. You may find nightmares, either above or below overactive or underactive. They can both come with nightmares, astral traveling, dreams that are intense and dark and fearful. This center is one of the most common for it to be leached from in the spiritual world. So with all of our chakras, to prevent them from having attachments and negative attachments, a good way to prevent that is by shielding the chakras. When you're working with your spiritual abilities, you want to open and close your third eye especially, because you don't want visions and downloads coming 24/7. You also don't want it open to attack. So close it as often as you can. One last thing that I'll mention as far as the underactive state goes with the third eye is having poor judgment. We just can't tell what to do anymore. So decision making may be very hard, very sluggish state. Okay? Alright, so that's a little bit around overactive, underactive, and in a nutshell, what the third eye is about beyond clairvoyant, seeing, and spiritual downloads. Okay? As above, so below.